Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Pakistan's economy has been under immense stress most recently, and the dire situation has been exacerbated by the devastation caused by the recent floods. And this prompted the Pakistani authorities to urge the international community to come for help, especially in terms of debt suspension and debt relief. And this particular call was also endorsed by United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres during his solidarity visit to Pakistan most recently. He estimated the losses accrued because of these devastating floods around $30 billion. Now, with already increased fuel prices, high inflation rate, as well as the devalued currency, the floods added insult to injury for Pakistan. Amid the challenging times, the Pakistani government saved the country from default, and at the same time they made a change at the helm of the finance ministry. Former finance minister took over the reins and took over the steering wheel of Pakistan's economy, Senator Ishaq Dar. And after he took over this reign, the dollar depreciated against the rupee, and for consecutive 8 sessions, Pakistani rupee has appreciated against the greenback. And without mincing any words, Finance Minister Senator Ishaq Dar has warned the speculators, and he has categorically said that this depreciation against the dollar of Pakistani rupee is artificial, and in the coming days the value of rupee is going to be increased for sure, and the speculators are going to be dealt with strictly by the government. And with this appreciation, there is a likelihood that the inflationary pressure on Pakistan's economy and the burden the masses were facing, especially after these devastating floods, is going to reduce, as well as the interest rates are also likely to reduce. So we'll delve deeper into discussion on these steps which are being taken by the current finance minister, Senator Ishaq Dar. But before that, our production team has made a report. Let's watch that first.
Pakistan has been struggling with plethora of economic challenges since months, and in order to provide relief to the common man of Pakistan, Premier Shehbaz Sharif and his economic team is tirelessly making various efforts to stabilize the nation's economy. In this regard, the government's decision to hand over the reign of Pakistan's economy to the senior PMLN leader Ishaq Dar proved to be successful, as the struggling Pakistan's economy finally found a slight relief and the dollar has came down. In his recent statement, Ishaq Dar stated that the government is working on a comprehensive strategy to bring the price of US dollar down to its actual market value, which is less than 200 rupees. He said that the government is aware of people's suffering and assured that every promise made with the public would be met. Finance Minister is also steering the nation's foreign economic engagements by following the agenda of global economic interdependence and interconnectedness, and in this regard, Finance Minister Ishaq Dar met with Ambassador of State of Qatar, Sheikh Saud bin Abdul Rahman bin Faisal Al Thani, and discussed measures to further strengthening the bilateral economic relations between Pakistan and Qatar. Meanwhile, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Munir Akram, while speaking at a debate on behalf of the Group of 77 and China at the United Nations General Assembly's Economic and Financial Committee, stressed the need for addressing the challenges faced by the poor countries while recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of financing sustainable development goals, fighting poverty, and combating the impacts of climate change. He added that recent geopolitical tensions and debilitating effects of climate change, which are being felt strongly by Pakistan in the wake of recent unprecedented floods, have heightened vulnerabilities of countries and people around the globe.
As you watch the report, there have been fervent calls at the international level for the international organizations, the financial institutions in particular, to chalk out a mechanism in order to provide relief to the countries which are under economic distress because of the climatic changes and the erratic events that have caused havoc across the nook and corner of the country, as such as Pakistan. Now, Finance Minister Senator Ishaq Dar also, while talking about the appreciation of rupee's value against the greenback, said that the central banks around the world had the role to make interventions in the market, and there were standards to do that particular thing. Now, this particular thing, of course, has given an immediate relief to the common man, but at the same time, it has also been criticized by the critics that there might be long-term repercussions to these measures which Senator Sardar has taken. Let's jump into discussion. We are privileged and honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Sardar Yasir Khan, who is former President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and will be joined by other panelists later in the show. So let's begin the discussion. Mr. Khan, how effective and fruitful do you think these measures by Senator Sardar are going to be, especially when it comes to providing immediate relief to the common people?
Firstly, thank you for having me. The business community has always had a different take on this. We've seen things very differently to the way they have, because we feel they've been disconnected from Pakistan for a very long time. And we've been here and we have a grip on the pulse of the economy. When we're talking about the central bank's interventions, let's look at a global macro perspective. And let's look at Japanese market, for example.
Well, let's move to that part later on the show, because the measures which are taken by Senator Sardar for providing immediate relief to the common man, how effective?
It's not sustainable, because at the moment I feel that the 8, 9, 10 rupees fluctuation is primarily based on speculation. There's nothing tangible to back that up. Fuel subsidies are again not sustainable. We've seen that being done in the previous government, and that couldn't be carried forward. IMF is going to kick in and say, you know what, you can't give fuel subsidies. Interest rate is already at 17%, which is going to contract your economy further, because people like us are no longer going to be able to acquire loans, obtain loans for any future development of any sort of projects. We're going to say, you know what, it's too expensive to borrow, might as well keep the funds at the bank, and the banks are offering us interest of about 15.5%. So therefore, I don't believe that this policy is sustainable, and that this is, a 1 month arrangement. With regards to meeting the Qatari government, with regards to meeting the Middle East, again, this is something which our allies were going to do anyway. We knew that they were going to bail Pakistan out, because a stable Pakistan means a stable region. Central Asia is connecting to Pakistan. China has a huge stake in Pakistan, and obviously stability in Afghanistan will only happen if Pakistan is stable. Therefore, nobody can afford Pakistan to...
There's been a little bit of criticism within the ranks of the government. Also, the former Finance Minister, Miftah Ismail, also criticizing this move. But at the same time, responding to this observation made by former Finance Minister, Senator Sardar said that he'd been dealing with the IMF from last 25 years, and it is between him and the IMF. And he's the only one who has completed one complete program with IMF, so he is pretty confident that measures that he is taking are going to be fruitful.
And I appreciate you mentioning that. So these 25 years has led us to a vicious circle, and we're doing exactly what we did in the past, and we're making the same mistakes all over again, and we're not learning from those mistakes. IMF is not Pakistan's solution. Our solution should have been to focus on exports. I've always said this, that we need to diversify our exports and find import substitution by focusing on indigenous manufacturing in Pakistan, and that's just not happened. We need to start up plant machinery. So CPEC came very late down the line. We've got currently about 70 industrial states, out of which about 22 are special economic zones. But how many companies do we have doing investments in Pakistan? And the current government goes out to the world on national TV, globally seen, and you're saying all hell is going to break loose in Pakistan. Imagine the negative impact that's going to have on overseas Pakistanis and on any FDI which is going to come into Pakistan, because you're painting a very grieved picture of Pakistan.
That is actually the situation on the ground, the kind of the scale and the proportion of the damage and the destruction the recent floods because of the climatic changes have caused. So that is exactly what we have to show to the world, because if we are going, if we want a debt restructuring or debt reprofiling, so a certain call like that has to be made. Otherwise, how Pakistan is going to deal with the challenges?
With what you acquired from the allied countries, you've taken about 12, 15, 16 billion. You've taken 10 billion from China. You've taken 3.5 from Saudi Arabia, another 3 from Qatar, another 2.5 from UAE. And you've said that we're now stable in some way. But collectively, within the next 2 years, you've got to pay back 34 billion in terms of debt repayments. Where is that 34 billion going to come from? So let's see the other side of the story, where a businessman is going to tell you. So the Ministry of Commerce has now just recently imposed 49% duties on items which were considered as luxury goods, but they're not really. There's only a certain category of luxury goods. All the other items which are construction related, development related, manufacturing related, raw materials are there, and they're all under, if you look at the HS codes, all of these items are now being charged 49% duties. If you speak to them, they're going to say, oh, this is only for a short term, 4 to 5 months, but it's not guaranteed. It could go longer, it could go on to a year, it could go on to 2 years. So imagine the cost that's going to have on the average person in Pakistan, because as a developer, or as a builder, or as a manufacturer, I'm going to incur that cost on my imports. I'm then going to embed that into my sale price. So locally, inflation is going to go even higher, so it's going to go higher than 40%, and my exports are going to become more expensive. Therefore, I will no longer be competitive in the world. So in every framework, for us to be able to satisfy IMF and for us to be able to satisfy our lenders, is going to pass the investment, the cost onto the end user, and that's for us not viable as Pakistanis.
Right. Right, your point is well taken. So let's bring in another panelist. We are now joined on the phone line by Dr. Gulfraz Ahmad, former Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum. Dr. Ahmad, thank you very much for your time at Views on News. How do you see these measures, the instant measures by Senator Sardar in order to revive, which are aimed actually at reviving the overall economy of Pakistan? The value of rupee is appreciating continuously against the dollar. He has cut off the petroleum products prices as well. That was a considerable decrease. How do you see this move?
Well, first of all, both these measures, if they can be achieved without hurting the macroeconomic situation, are definitely considered very helpful for the people of Pakistan. First of all, the reduction in the value of dollar in terms of Pakistani rupee would reduce our loan burden, and at the same time reduce the price of imported goods. A lot of things are imported, including energy, which is LNG and oil, petroleum products. So reducing the price of dollar with respect to Pakistan rupees, are bringing it down to below 200 would have a great positive effect upon the economy of Pakistan. But how does one achieve this measure? That is where there would have to be a focus. If we are going to use up dollars to bring the value of Pakistan rupee higher, that is going to be very detrimental. So, whereas on one hand, appreciation of Pakistan rupee is going to be very positive, but the manner it is to be done, that is where the question arises. If it's a positive manner, then everything is fine. But if the manner is not positive, if it is only buying the dollar from the market, and those measures which were done in the previous tenure of Mr. Sardar, those measures could be detrimental.
So, Dr. Gulfraz Ahmad, beg your pardon for the interruption, when Finance Minister Senator Sardar says that this particular depreciation of rupee against the greenback is artificial and is warned the speculators to set their direction right, otherwise strict action will be taken against them. So what does he imply? Do speculators have to do something with this particular depreciation of rupee's value?
Well, if, for example, through those measures, which only by controlling the negative efforts of the speculators, if he can reduce the value of dollar to that Pakistan rupee, that would be positive. But if, like it used to be said last time, that the government was buying the dollar from the black market in order to shore up Pakistan rupee's value, that would be negative. But what you just mentioned, if Mr. Sardar is able to control the unofficial money market and the speculators, and if that can help to control the value of dollar with respect to Pakistan rupee, that would be all right. Now, the second point that you mentioned about the energy, actually, IMF cannot dictate the exact price of energy that we sell, because we have to take care of our economy. IMF cannot manage our economy totally, and therefore I am in agreement with Mr. Sardar that he should see if the high price at this point in time of energy, where the world is, Pakistan is facing the serious consequences of flood. Pakistan is facing the serious consequence of the increase in price of food internationally because of the Ukraine war. Under these circumstances, whatever relief the government of Pakistan can bring to the people of Pakistan, They must do that, otherwise the economy will go further down. This is the time when we are going to do the sowing of our biggest crop, the wheat crop. And this is the time when the price of all the inputs into our farming, the price of the low-speed diesel, which is used in the farming tractor industry, the water, the price of water which used to tube well, the price of seeds, the price of fertilizers are so high that we may not be able to plant to our capacity, and that would prolong our economic woes. So I personally feel that during these very few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, which is the sowing season of the wheat, that we must try to bring as much of a relief to the farmers as we possibly can. And this reduction in price, which is only 5% price of diesel and petrol, that may be a welcome relief, but it's enough. It's not enough. So we need to do more in order to enable the farmers to plant, and also enable the other aspect that you see. This is the time when the vegetables, during the month of June and August, July and August, the vegetable production goes down because of the excessive rainfall. But in the month of October, the production is back again, but the prices are still very high because of transportation costs. So that is another thing that government needs to look at and go well beyond 5% reduction, which they have done already. In fact, at least another 5% should be on the card to give a little bit of help to the struggling economy of the country.
So, Dr. Gulfraz Ahmad, thank you very much for your time at Views on News, former Secretary Ministry of Petroleum. We really appreciate your time. So, Mr. Khan, when a finance minister says that this particular depreciation of rupee is artificial and it's basically because of speculators and strict action would be taken. So whatever the measure he has taken right now, and that is manifested in form of appreciation of rupee's value against the greenback, so that very much justifies that the speculators are involved, and he said that he's happy that they have already set their direction right.
Look, speculators are always going to be there in any market, any economy in the world. They're always there. It's everyone is an opportunist, and they try taking advantage of any given form. And this is perhaps a loophole they found, and they're capitalizing on this. We have an undocumented economy. That's given. I mean, only 3% people are paying taxes. So that shows you how much cash there is. And because of the fear and because of uncertainty, a lot of people are taking that cash out of Pakistan and taking it abroad, simply because there's better opportunities elsewhere. Like I told you, currently, I can get financing anywhere in the world, especially developed countries, at less than 5% net. So why on earth would somebody want to invest in Pakistan? Because there's no capital growth there. There's no capital appreciation. Anyone who's bought property in the last 3 to 4 years is pretty much selling that property at the same rate today because of the devaluation of the rupee. And because of that uncertainty, that market has now collapsed. The bubble has burst in a way for us. So we've induced a recession in our own country. Let me give you the macro side of this, which is something that they haven't looked in or factored into. The US right now is at a 20-year high in terms of its dollar value. And if you compare that with the rest of the world, and this is where the interbanks come in, a lot of these central banks have tried their fiscal policies and tried to manipulate their currencies, but has an adverse effect. So in Japan, for example, Japanese yen has gone 20% down against the dollar. The euro and pound has gone 15% down, and similarly, China has gone 10%. And this is a historic record when you compare it to the dollar.
Because of the kind of monetary policy
exactly.
the US Federal Reserve Bank has introduced, and that seems to be
hawkish.
hawkish.
But it's working in their favor. Now, look at the other side of it. We're anticipating a recession coming into the US and into Europe. And I've spoken to multiple analysts, I've spoken to multiple bankers, and they're saying, yes, we are foreseeing that. If that happens, look at what's happening with the uncertainty at the moment. So there's an energy crisis, there's the war with Russia and Ukraine, which is why the wheat prices are higher, edible oil prices are higher, but the US is going to benefit because US is already a producer of natural gas and they're a producer of oil. Europe isn't. Europe is dependent on Russia, and at the current scenario, their currencies have declined already, so the US is safe. So if the US exports, they're at a benefit, and globally we trade, our contracts are done in dollar values. So they're going to benefit either way. It's Pakistan that's going to suffer at the end of the day, because if the recession happens, everything is going to get more expensive.
But the example of the countries that you've just mentioned, now the central banks of those countries have also intervened, and they've also taken some measures against the monetary policy of the US. So why can't Pakistan's central bank intervene and take some measures which are now currently being
Those
taken?
economies are regular economies which have a lot of cash and reserve available. Look at Bangladesh, for example. They've got $40 billion left that they own, not loans. Pakistan is running on fumes. If this was purely based on internal finances and our fiscal policy was based on whatever we had, we haven't got anything. So if you're going to devise policy because you know that you haven't got the money in place and you're just going to generate tax on tax and on tax, and you're going to liquidate everything that you have in the country, and you think that that's going to bring the revenue into Pakistan, this is exactly what's happening with your rupee. Your rupee is devalued as high as it can because we haven't got any funds in place. There's two other factors, the fiscal deficit and the current account deficit. And we've again said this, that if these guys are coming back in 25 years, what have they done differently? So why is the country bleeding at the moment? Because the country hasn't got the funds, so we keep saying we have a month worth of imports. But tell me the other side of it. What about the state-owned enterprise? Why have we been not able to privatize and minimize and curtail our expenditures? If we had done that, if I as a taxpayer am paying money, my money is going down the drain. That money is not being used in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of utilities, in terms of your allied sectors.
Right.
That's not happening. So how is the country prospering? So in 25 years, we're taking the loan from IMF, and we're paying all of these salaries, all these government institutions which are not required because they're not profitable. They should have been privatized 20 years ago.
Please hold your thought over here. We'd like to introduce another guest in the show, Miss Ariba Shahid. She's a business journalist joining us on Skype. Miss Ariba, thank you very much for your time at Views on News. How do you see these particular moves by slashing the petroleum products prices immediately after taking the reins of Pakistan's economy, and as well as after he became the finance minister, Mr. Sardar, the value of rupee has continuously appreciated against the greenback?
Hi, so I lost half of your question. Could you repeat it? The rupee appreciating, what did you say before that?
The value of rupee has appreciated since Senator Sardar took over the steering wheel of Pakistan's economy.
So if we look at the way
What factors
the
do you think contributed to this appreciation of rupee's value?
So if we look at the rupee depreciation since January, the rupee depreciated 60% until Sardar came in, and now the rupee has appreciated in value. There are multiple reasons for this appreciation. One is some people feel that the rupee depreciated more than it needed to because of the banks, the commercial banks taking the government and taking consumers for a ride. Recently, the State Bank has also called in the treasurers for 8 banks to their office, and they've given them a show cause notice. They're doing an investigation based on how much premiums these banks have charged back in June, July, which further pushed the rupee up, which further pushed the shortage of the dollar up in the Pakistani market. So one thing is that. The other thing is that when Sardar came in, and because of his public statements about how the rupee should be somewhere around 200, because of these statements, which he had made multiple times in the past as well, the market anticipated that he will take some steps to bring down the rupee. Now, before he could actually do anything, because this is a sentiment-driven market, lots of people sold off the dollars that they had saved or savings that they had dollarized. So I feel that there's twofold to this. One is the banks that took the government and consumers on a ride and went through exorbitant rates just to make more profits for themselves. And the other is Sardar's sentiment that he brings along that, you know what, I'm going to manage the rupee. I don't care at what cost, but the rupee is going to be managed. So these two
during the last stint, Ms. Ariba, he had this idea of having a very narrow exchange rate, and this time around he has implemented that policy right away as soon as he took over the reins. Now, what possible actions? Of course, at that time, if during the last stint the exchange rate was that narrow, it means the speculators were under control of the government authority. This time around, there could be some measures, as Senator Sardar has categorically said that they will be dealt with strictly. What possible actions could be taken by the government right now, and what policies were implemented during the last stint that kept the speculators at bay from following such type of policy?
To be very honest, last time around, there was not much control on speculators as such. There was more control on the central bank. So the control on the central bank meant that the bank would then control the commercial banks. Right now, because of the State Bank Autonomy Act, it does not really have control over the central bank, uh, or is not supposed to have control of the central bank, and as a result, does not have direct control of the bank. As for speculators right now, the state bank has come up with multiple policies to deal with speculators. One is you cannot buy dollars unnecessarily. So two reasons that if you need to buy dollars, you need to buy a significant amount of dollars. You need to have your CNIC, your biometric, you need to show them your ticket, you need to show them your travel passport, you show them multiple things for you to qualify enough to get dollars. So that has already been done even before Sardar stepped foot into the country. This has been done for around 4 years. The problem is that back then, Sardar was able to manage the currency by managing the central bank, by the central bank managing the banks and controlling the demand and supply of the dollar and the rupee. This time around, Sardar will have to go through the same route. However, that is very challenging considering our reserves are not the way they were in the past. Our reserves will only be at such a position where we can afford to do so if we get significant aid as a result of the flood.
So, Ms. Ariba, you definitely been having interaction with the business community. How are the financial markets reacting to this move?
So to think of it this way, one, in our country, the petroleum prices and the currency is highly politicized, even though these are demand and supply factors. Any government that has been in power, boasts itself that, you know what, we have cheap petrol or we have a really nice dollar rate. And I feel that that is the fundamental issue in Pakistan. However, the business community right now, what they're seeing it as is that, you know what, our already dwindling exports are now going to be seen as more expensive worldwide. So we will have a problem with our exports. However, because our country is primarily import-led driven, we will see some sort of relief in the price of imports that we bring in. However, the relief is also limited because the whole world is going through a commodity cycle crisis as well.
So, do you mean to imply that it's not going to be sustainable, or it's going to have some repercussions in the longer run?
So the business community, because we've been here before. When 2018, we've been here before. The rupee was overvalued by a significant amount, and then the rupee was depreciated by a significant amount, and we've borne the brunt of it. It was a tough time where the rupee was led to depreciate, and the country has borne the brunt of it. And now, going through the whole process again, after it will be led to appreciate is also something that the business community is worried about, because one, we do not have the reserves to control the currency. Two, we do not have the exports to control the currency. We are not in a position where we can determine what rate we want the dollar at.
So, is it because the exports are not competitive internationally, or we don't have that capacity to produce that kind of amount that could be exported? So, what's the intrinsic issue associated with this?
So there are lots of issues going on. One is, yes, they're not as competitive because of the pricing, etc., because the quantum is not big enough. Two, they're not as competitive in terms of quality. Three, we do not brand, so we don't get the addition of value added. So for instance, if you make salt, pink salt, and you sell it as a commodity, instead later on, if you do value addition, you sell it as a bottle or something. Those things actually help. We don't do that. Four, we go to the cheaper markets. We don't access the really expensive markets, the top tier markets in the world. So because of that, our exports are primarily a concern, a pain point for us. Our imports, however, are such that we find them very inelastic in terms of the fact that we have to import most of these products regardless of whether we like them or not. And a few months ago, the Ministry of Finance went through an austerity move where they banned imports. But it's very important to point out that our imports are significantly necessity-based, and the luxury goods that we import make up a very small percentage that will not even make a difference on the rupee if we stop importing them.
Right, Ms. Ariba, your point is well taken. Let's talk to Mr. Khan. When we talk about Pakistan building a narrative of debt reprofiling, do you think this particular move or the moves which have been taken by Senator Sardar are in line with that narrative?
I think this should have been a long time ago. And if they're doing it now, it's definitely the right approach. We need to take a stance and tell the rest of the world that, you know what, we're not beggars. We're perceived to be, but we're not. The country has a capacity to export well over $200 billion annually. If you just look at tourism, from tourism alone, $30 billion can be generated. If you look at gems and jewelry and minerals, you've seen Balochistan, you've seen Turbat, you've seen all the locations we have, untapped, unseen locations, unseen resources. And again, that's another $20–30 billion. If you look at the agro side, we're not even touching that. If you look at the IT side, again, we're not capitalizing on that. There's much more. There's leathers. There's many other sectors. So if we collectively put all of that together, there's much more Pakistan is capable of, but are we really touching those sectors? Recently, the government had an interaction with the Qatar Investment Authority, which has at its discretion $400 billion at any given time. And we're talking about privatization of PIA perhaps, but that's just a tip of the iceberg. What about JVs? Like I said, we've got 21 to 22 special economic zones which are operational at the moment. Gwadar is giving you a 20-year tax holiday. Are we not able to bring factories and plants and machinery? You said production capacity, that's exactly where we're shortfall. Even if I get 100 orders for a certain item, I may not be able to give them 100. Furniture, for example. Furniture-wise, Turkey is exporting perhaps 3 billion. We're hardly touching 50 million. We don't have the capacity. We have the skill, but not the capacity to produce because there's no transfer of technology. There's no value addition. And this is the same I can talk about for many others. And when we're going to excel, we're going to excel when the government takes an initiative, does a roadshow, and shows the rest of the world what Pakistan has to offer. So FDI is imminently required right now. With the impeding slowdown of worldwide economy, Pakistan can capitalize on that because this is exactly what we did during COVID-19. The world had closed down, Pakistan was open, and they said, you know what, let's go to Pakistan, let's try them, for example. Our exports went up. I mean, we were touching nearly close to 30 billion perhaps, and our GDP had gone to 6.5% during COVID-19, or right after COVID-19, which to the world was a surprise. Even WHO recognized Pakistan.
There are a lot of odds which Pakistan needs to do, but at the same time, given the circumstances, as Pakistan has been massively hit by the devastation of the floods, so what should be done in immediate terms? Of course, it should be there should be an international call, which has already been endorsed by the UN Secretary General, of the debt servicing and debt relief and restructuring. So in the immediate term, there doesn't seem to be any other solution other than this.
This is going to take a long time, by the way. If you look at the numbers, let me give you some numbers. You're looking at about 7,000 kilometers of road. You're looking at nearly 5 provinces and 80 districts. You're looking at about 33 million people. So this is a huge number. And this is going to take years of rebuilding, relocation. Majority of these people that have been dislocated, they don't even have proper data on who those people were, where those people are residing, because they don't have Nadra cards. They don't have CNICs. These are people that are on urban plan communities. So this is devastating to another level entirely. So for us to have the accurate data, we 2 days ago sent 50 trucks. We've already sent 600 tons of goods from Islamabad alone, and there's much more coming in. But I've told my business community, slow down. We're going to have to plan this, phase it out, because there's going to be much more that we have to do. We have to look at employing people. We're going to have to rearrange schooling. We're going to have to look at healthcare sites. We're going to have to look at arranging pharma medications from Pakistan. So there's a lot more that has to be done. So in terms of the world, IMF can give us RFI, Rapid Financing Instrument. Through that, we can get 5 to 600 million right away from them. We've got the US aid programs. We've got plenty of NGOs worldwide that are willing to work with us, but they need to reestablish the trust aspect. There's a huge trust deficit. We've interacted with multiple countries, and there's been a huge gap over the last few years, simply because after 2005 earthquake, and then we've got the 2010 floods, since then there's been a lot of instability. Everyone that we speak to, they want political and economic stability for us to be able to talk to them and have a table dialogue, for them to trust us and give us the funding.
Right. Ms. Ariba, what's your take? Are these policies of Senator Sardar in line with that narrative Pakistan is building right now of the debt restructuring and debt relief?
Going to go through, so the debt restructuring process that we're going to go through, I feel that the process that Sardar is trying to undertake shows that Pakistan's may need some better terms, especially considering the flood at hand, and especially considering the scale of the issue at hand. But it shows that, we're here to actually fulfill our commitments. We may need some help, but we will get through it. And the way he wants it to be done from a point of position where, Pakistan is trying to position itself as a country that means business, I feel that is something that we could look forward to. As far as reprofiling is concerned, it will be a hassle considering the reluctancies of some countries. But let's see. I think the flood, despite it being a terrible situation for the country to be in, I feel that that can help as the extra trigger to initiate the refiling.
So, Ms. Ariba, what about the slashing of the petroleum products prices? They seem to be quite fruitful in the immediate term for the common masses.
So I think it's very important to note that the structural problem is that we talk about the petroleum prices on and off, about how petroleum prices are increased, how it's bad for the people, how when they're decreased, it's good for the people. I feel the structural problem is that petroleum prices really, 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 at this point in time, need to be deregulated. So while we see this as relief for the masses, but the next time a commodity super cycle comes and the prices go up, um, the prices are going to shoot up again. Um, and again, our country needs as many revenue inflows as possible. So with the PTL going down, it is important to note that we are putting ourselves in a tough position in the future, especially going forward, where you don't know how commodity prices are going to react. So again, I feel that seeing petrol prices as a relief for consumers is not the right move. But yes, that is what the population is seeing it as. Uh, but how sustainable this is also important because our revenue resources are also limited, and the PDL acts like a major source.
If I heard you right, you said that it's not the right move.
Yeah, no, it's not the right move because
So
the
why
right.
isn't it the right move? There has been an opposing voice from within the government ranks also. The former finance minister, Mifta Ismail, also criticizing this move. Why do you think this is not the right move?
So the right move, this is a quick fix solution. This is a quick fix solution to the problem that we always have at hand. The right move for a long-term solution, again within the party, was also pushed forward by Shahid when he was petroleum minister, is deregulation of petroleum products, primarily for the fact that when you deregulate them, the market forces decide the prices. So no longer can the petroleum prices being up or down be a political move to gain or or get away with favor. So I feel that is also important. And again, we have limited inflows. We are in an IMF program. Austerity is important. So considering all of that, the petroleum prices being
So,
reduced at the.
Senator Ishaq Dar said these additional levies are unjustified, and he had a meeting with the IMF mission chief, and there was a nod by the IMF mission chief regarding this particular thing. Afterwards, which the prices of petroleum products were reduced.
I think that is also a case-to-case basis, primarily because of the flood at hand and the inflation that we're witnessing. So maybe if we did not have the flood, the mission chief would not have been okay with it. But because of the flood and the 40-year high inflation rate, maybe that is why we have been given the chance to do this. However, in normal circumstances, this is not the right move.
So let's talk about the appreciation of rupee's value. Senator Ishaq Dar has alluded to the fact that the central banks can intervene with a certain standards after following those standards. So it is happening internationally as well. We'd been discussing earlier in the show that because of the hawkish monetary policy by the US Federal Reserve, certain bigger economies, including Japan, even certain European economies, have also let their central banks intervene. So when it comes to Pakistan's central bank, so why does it happen to be a little worrisome thing for the business community, in particular the representative of which is sitting right now with us in the studio as well?
So primarily, I'll tell you what, it is a misconception that the central bank does not intervene. The central bank does intervene. And if you listen to the former Governor Raza Bakr, whenever he was asked about the rupee, he would give a simple answer. We do intervene if and when we see necessary. Whenever anything goes against the trend, whenever anything is beyond regular, the central bank has intervened and will continue to intervene. So regardless of the Central Bank Amendment Act, regardless of that, the central bank does intervene. The extent of the intervention is such that it allows the market forces to determine the exchange rate, but it doesn't let haphazard market forces determine it. So the central bank has been intervening if and when necessary based on its resources. But when we're talking about what's happening right now, what we're doing, if we control the rupee, we are not really intervening, we are controlling it. So internationally, when you're talking about other countries, yes, they intervene the same way we have in the past. No, they don't control.
So if this particular course continues, the exchange rate of Pakistani rupee against the dollar remains narrow, and the value of rupee against the dollar is brought below 200 rupees. So definitely it is going to lead into more imports, and that is going to have a burden on local companies as well. Definitely they are going to reduce their prices as well in order to remain competitive with the other companies, the product of which are being imported at a lower price. Now, what challenge do you think the local companies could face because of this move?
So local companies might have to bring their prices down, but it's very difficult for them because prices are sticky down. What that means is that their imports that have already cost this much, that have already inflated to this price, will not be coming down. So for them to bring their prices down, they will have to run losses, which will either result in companies shutting down or relocating to different jurisdictions. So what I feel is that when you encourage imports, what you're doing is you are widening your current account deficit, which will further put pressure and competition in local companies. You might lose out on local companies producing. You might also lose out on employment. So these are some spillovers that you may face. But yeah, no, increasing
So
imports. Although our
that
country is an
implies the
import-led
growth is going to be import-based and more consumption-oriented. So is it going to be sustainable?
So it's very interesting. So our country goes through multiple boom bust cycles over the past decade. Just think of this as another boom bust where the country will boom because consumption will be high, the GDP growth will be high because we'll use imports to produce more probably. So import-led growth will increase, consumption-led growth will increase. But at the end of the day, when the party is over, when our reserves cannot sustain the dollar or the rupee anymore, we will face the bust just like we did in 2018.
So, but immediately, what are the solutions if these measures are considered wrong for a moment, supposedly? So, what solution do you think lies at the hands of the Pakistani authorities in the immediate terms for the revival of economy?
So the immediate term solutions at present are primarily let the market forces do their thing, but also increase supervision. But do not over-regulate, because when the economy is over-regulated, what happens is we create a gray economy. So back when foreign goods were banned in Pakistan, we created a gray economy where people started to bring in stuff through illegal means, etc. So I feel that is one other issue that needs to be addressed. So one is let the market forces do their thing. Two is do not overregulate and create gray economies within an already undocumented economy. The solution at hand would primarily be targeted subsidies, targeted solutions, rather than blanket solutions by giving everyone cheap petrol or by giving everyone cheap dollars. The solution
Right.
lies in creativity.
Right. Mr. Khan, your brief take on what could be the possible solutions in immediate terms at the hand of Pakistan.
Right away, start giving targeted subsidies to your industries. Large-scale manufacturing needs to be facilitated. Your tariffs are very high at the moment. We are not competitive anymore as we were, so we're not going to be able to export. It is not about the dollar. It's primarily about how it's costing us, how much it's costing us to produce. So if we're going to be expensive, we're not going to be competitive locally or internationally, and the local consumer is going to end up paying a much higher price, hence inflation. We need to introduce an SME policy. We've got nearly 4 million plus SMEs in Pakistan, and currently a lot of companies opening up are closing before they open because they haven't got the financing in place. There's no financial model. Again, going for interest rate to about 22% perhaps if somebody wants to go for an SME. We need to focus on sectors which are unexplored. Handicraft, for example. Handicraft worldwide is a $600 billion industry, targeted to touch 1.3 trillion. Perhaps we're not even getting 1% of that. So there's a lot of different sectors which we haven't tapped yet. Women economic empowerment. We need to focus on that. We need to focus on youth, talent. You know, majority of the academic institutions don't have hospitality management programs. We're not even focusing on hospitality. Imagine a sector which is untapped, so we're not training our human resource. Need-based academia is important because we're going to have graduates coming up and they're going to look for jobs. Jobs should come to them because they've got the right qualification. We shouldn't be exporting this talent. There's a lot of brain drain. If you go to all the institutions right now, 50% of the youth is saying we're applying overseas, perhaps Canada, we're going to apply for immigration. We don't want to do that. We're going to lose out this talent and we're going to have to re-import this at a much higher cost. We need to add value. We need to bring in industry, plant at a much lower cost. We need to destructure the FBR mechanism. Currently, there's 70 types of taxes, already complicated, it's very expensive. We can't keep imposing taxes on taxes for existing taxpayers. So we need to broaden the tax net by reducing the tax forms. And this is the simplest way. The luxury goods are very specific. They hardly have perhaps a 3%, 2% impact on the entire trade balance. What about everything else? So don't consider everything else as having an impact on the entire balance. This has to be regulated and has to be reduced because we need to ensure that the economy moves forward. And again, the real estate sector, we have 50 to 60 allied industries that are working with us. There's tax on tax, there's deep rental income, there's capital gain tax, there's non-filer tax. This has to be sorted out.
It was wonderful having you, Sardar Yasir Khan, former President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry, on the show today. We really appreciate your time. And Miss Ariba Shahid, she was joining us on Skype, business journalist. Thank you for being on Views on News. Really appreciate your time as well. Of course, there has been appreciation of rupee against the greenback after Senator Sardar took over the reins of Pakistan's economy, and he also slashed the petroleum products prices. Of course, these measures have given a sort of relief to the masses in immediate terms, but there are certain other measures the government really need to take care of, increasing the exports of the country and reduce dependency on the imports, and also vie for foreign direct investment, and also giving the targeted subsidies. With that note, we come to the end of today's Views on News. Until the next episode, take good care of yourselves.